Are wolves really as dangerous as we think they are? Most of the time the answer is yes. So when this young boy is surrounded by 3 wild wolves, no one was expecting something amazing to happen. When we talk about wolves, we often recognize how they are one of the most dangerous predators in the wild. And it's not hard to see why. With their sharp teeth, large size, and ability to work as a team, they truly are formidable. Because of this, lots of people believe that they are too vicious and that they're unable to feel empathy, making them nothing like our beloved pet dogs. But is this always true? Before we get into the heart of this story, we would like to tell you that this is a fictional story, meaning that it didn't really happen. Despite this, it doesn't take away from the true meaning of this tale, one about love and friendship that transcends species. A little boy called George grew up on the edge of a forest. To him, it was the best place to be. And even though where he lived often got very cold, he loved his home and its surroundings with all of his heart, and he couldn't have wished for a better place to spend his childhood. As he got older, George's love for nature grew even more. And after his parents passed away, he was left with his childhood home at the edge of the forest. With so many memories already in the home, and with its location being so beautiful, George knew that he would never be able to sell the house, and instead, he chose to live there himself. Not long after, he met a woman called May, who he soon fell in love with. George wasted no time in proposing to May, and they were soon engaged. Now, at first, the couple thought that they should wait a while before they got married so they could save their money for a ceremony. But things don't always go to plan. Not long after becoming engaged, May discovered that she was pregnant. With this new information, the couple decided to move forward with their wedding. 9 months later, the couple's son, Thomas, was born. George and May loved Thomas with everything they had, and were overjoyed with the little life that they had brought into the world. Thomas grew up surrounded by nature, much like his father had, and he soon developed his own love for the natural wonders of the world. As the young boy grew, so did his passion for the wild and everything in it. Unfortunately, not everyone shared his love for nature, and at school he was seen as the weird kid. Because of this, he didn't have any friends, and instead used his imagination to entertain himself. At the start of every morning, the boy's father would venture into the woods to collect firewood for the house. But what started off as a typical day soon turned into something much more for the little boy. George, like usual, ventured into the woods with the aim of collecting as much firewood as he could for his family, as it was a harsh winter. With an arm full of wood, the man was just finishing up his daily routine when he heard a strange sound. It sounded like a little dog whimpering. Curious as to what it could be, George followed the noise further into the forest, and what he found broke his heart. There, amongst the trees and freshly fallen snow, was a young wolf who had been caught in a bear trap. The wolf was badly injured and in desperate need of help. But it was still a wild animal, and George was scared to get too close to it in case it tried to attack him. It seemed like the animal had been stuck in the trap for at least a day, but that didn't make it any less threatening. After watching the canine for a few minutes, George noticed something that made him worry even more. It turned out that the wolf was a female, and she was clearly breastfeeding, meaning that she had pups around somewhere who had been left all on their own. Worried for the young wolf's safety, George ventured into the woods and looked around for where the babies could possibly be. He eventually saw a small cave where the mother wolf had clearly made her den, but what he saw inside broke his heart. Inside the den were 3 young wolf cubs, but because their mother had not been able to get back to them, 2 of the pups had frozen to death in the night. Only one survived, and he was incredibly cold and hungry. George quickly picked the cub up and ran back to the mother wolf. He placed the baby animal next to his mother so that he could feed and warm up. Knowing he needed to help the wolves in some way, George took his pile of firewood back home, where he gathered some food and water to give to the animals in need. But it was too late. Upon returning to the wolves, George noticed that the mother canine had succumbed to her injuries. She had passed away and snuggled up to her only remaining cub. Now, while saddened by the sight, the man also noticed that the baby wolf was still alive. George knew that he wouldn't survive long on his own, and made the decision to take him back home with him. The cub was still very young and would surely make a good friend to his son. The man was right. When Thomas was introduced to the young wolf, he was overcome with joy. The family took care of the canine as if it were a family dog. But Thomas was the only one who had the strongest bond with him. The young boy decided to name his new friend Aaron, and together they would play and explore the woods nearby. Their bond was incredibly strong, but unfortunately, Aaron was still a wild animal, and as such, had natural instincts that couldn't be ignored. As Aaron grew, he got bigger and bigger. Soon, he was too large to sleep inside the house, and so the family built him a small hut outside where he could spend the nights. One evening, as Thomas wished his friend a good night, the wolf looked at him as if he was trying to tell the boy something, but Thomas didn't understand. The next day, when the family woke up, they went outside to say hello to Aaron, but he wasn't there. As the hours passed, there was still no sign of the wolf. The family understood what had happened. Being a wild animal, Aaron was not meant to live in a home like a domesticated dog, so he had to run away to live like a normal wolf. Thomas was devastated at the loss of his best friend. To try and cheer him up, his parents bought him a puppy. And while the boy loved the little dog, no one would ever replace Aaron. Several years passed, and Thomas was almost a grown man. Now that he was older, he would often help his father out by taking over some of his chores, such as collecting firewood. One day, Thomas was in the woods doing just that. He was on his way home when suddenly a huge wolf stepped out in front of him. The boy tried to remain calm, but when he looked around, he noticed two more wolves on either side of him. He was trapped. Thomas was frozen with fear. The canine started to approach the young man. In response, Thomas fell to the floor, certain that it was the end for him. Eventually, the wolves were so close that Thomas could hear them breathing. He stared into the eyes of the canines, terrified of what was to come. To make matters worse, a fourth wolf then appeared from the trees, growling menacingly. Thomas started praying, hoping for a swift death. But as the fourth wolf got closer, it suddenly stopped growling and started wagging its tail. Well, the young man was confused at this. Why was the seemingly dangerous predator happily wagging its tail at him? After looking more closely at the animal, Thomas came to a great realization. The fourth wolf was his childhood friend, Aaron. The young man slowly reached out his hand to try and stroke the wolf, but the animal simply turned away. While they might have been friends, Aaron was a wild animal more so than ever now, so he had adopted to the forest and the life of a true wolf. The wolf left the area, taking his pack with him and leaving the boy unharmed. Thomas broke into tears, partly because he was relieved that he was alive, and partly because he was happy to have seen his best friend one last time. After this ordeal, Thomas gathered his firewood and returned home. And while he was sad that he might never see Aaron again, he was also happy to know that his best friend was living happily the way he was meant to.